When I was little, I used to ask my parents, how did you meet? How did you fall in love? They would smile at each other, and my mom would laugh softly. Then they'd tell me their story, and I never got tired of hearing it. Now I'll share it with you, just as they shared it with me. It all started many years ago in a small town. My dad was a quiet, serious guy who worked at the bookstore. He loved reading and spent most of his free time with books. My mom, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She was cheerful, outgoing, and always full of energy. She worked at the bakery across the street from the bookstore. One rainy afternoon, my mom ran into the bookstore to escape the rain. She didn't have an umbrella. She was completely soaked. My dad was behind the counter, and when he saw her, he offered her a towel. Here, you can dry yourself, he said. My mom smiled and said, thanks. It's like the weather wanted me to come here. She looked around the bookstore and asked him, do you have any books about baking? My dad smiled a little and said, yes, we do. Come with me. He took her to the cooking section and showed her a few books. My mom was impressed. You know a lot about books, she said. My dad replied shyly, well, I work here. From that day, my mom started visiting the bookstore more often. She always found an excuse to stop by. Sometimes she asked about books, and sometimes she just said hello. My dad was nervous at first, but he started looking forward to her visits. One day, my mom said, you're always so serious. Why don't you smile more? My dad didn't know what to say, but then he laughed. It was the first time my mom had seen him laugh. She said, there it is. You have a nice smile. Soon they started talking about other things, life, dreams, and favorite books. My mom would bring him cookies from the bakery, and my dad would recommend new books for her to read. Slowly but surely, they became friends. But it didn't stop there. One evening, my dad surprised her. He came into the bakery after work with a small bouquet of flowers. He handed it to her and said, I thought you might like this. My mom blushed and said, thank you. They are beautiful. My dad smiled and said, I like talking to you. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? That was the beginning of their love story. My parents told me their first date was simple but unforgettable. My dad took my mom to a small cafe in the town center. He was so nervous that he kept checking his watch, afraid he would arrive late. My mom, on the other hand, showed up 5 minutes early, wearing a bright red dress that she said was her lucky dress. When they sat down, my dad was so shy he barely spoke. My mom laughed and said, come on, don't be so serious. It's just me. That made him relax, and soon they started talking like they always did at the bookstore and bakery. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams for the future, and even their favorite foods. My dad told her he wanted to own a library someday. My mom said she dreamed of opening her own bakery where she could make cakes and pastries that would make people smile. At one point, my dad accidentally knocked over his glass of water. He was embarrassed, but my mom just laughed and said, it's okay. That's how you know it's a real date. Something funny always happens. After dinner, they walked home together. The stars were out, and my dad pointed to the sky. Do you see that constellation? He asked her. My mom shook her head. No, I don't know much about stars, she admitted. My dad smiled and said, I'll teach you someday. As they walked, my mom said, I've never met anyone like you. You're kind, thoughtful, and little awkward, but in a good way. My dad laughed and said, and I've never met anyone like you. You're so full of life. You make everything brighter. From that night on, they were inseparable. They spent their weekends exploring the town. My mom would teach my dad how to bake cookies, and my dad would read poetry to her. even though he said he wasn't very good at it. My mom loved it anyway. A year later, my dad did something surprising. One evening, he brought my mom to the bookstore where they first met. He had closed it early, and there were candles on the shelves and flowers everywhere. My mom looked around and said, "What's all this?" My dad got down on one knee and said, "This is where we met, and this is where I want to start our next chapter. Will you marry me?" My mom cried and said, "Yes, of course." They got married a few months later in a small ceremony with their closest friends and family. My mom says it was the happiest day of her life. My dad agrees, but he always jokes, except for the day I met her in the rain. Their story inspires me so much. It's proof that love can start in the most unexpected places, a bookstore and a rainy afternoon. Now they live together in a small but cozy house. They had me a few years after they got married, and they always say I'm their greatest adventure. Even now, when I see them together, it's like they're still that young couple who met on a rainy day. My dad still surprises my mom with flowers, and my mom still bakes his favorite cookies. They laugh together, tease each other, and share everything, just like they did when they first fell in love. Their love story didn't end with their wedding. It keeps growing every day. Watching them makes me believe that true love is real and worth waiting for. That's the story of my parents, my favorite love story.
I hope you liked this story. If you could improve your English a little more, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend. Thank you very much for your support. Take care.